Hey everyone, this is Bryan, and I want to thank you for checking out the podcast and remind you that at the beginning of 2023, the name of our podcast is changing to Church Advance with Bryan Samms. If you're already following or subscribed to the podcast, there's nothing you have to do because everything is going to be pushed to this same podcast feed. You're just simply going to notice that the name and the podcast artwork is going to display the new name effective January 1st of 2023. If you've not yet, be sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, if you enjoy this content, please don't hesitate to leave us a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends. Thanks again for being a part of our podcast audience. And now, on to this week's episode.
You're listening to an ongoing discussion on life, leadership, and ministry. This is the Bryan Samms Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bryan Samms Podcast. This is your host, Bryan Samms. Today we're wrapping up 2022 with our annual Best Books of 2022 episode. And I am joined by my former co-host of the Bryan Samms Podcast, Aaron Chan. Aaron, welcome back, man.
Man, I cannot stay away. I just gotta be here, man.
Yes. Look, you missed a couple of episodes, and he was clawing at my office door, saying, "Bryan, I just can't stay away." So I said, you know what? And really, Aaron, I think regardless of where life takes us, we're going to reassemble at least once a year for this episode.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
So I do this every year, and this year we're going to do things a little bit different to make it easier on everybody. We are going to do a random drawing from our email list. So right now, if you're not a part of the Bryan Samms Podcast email list, if you will go on to bryansamms.com and you will join our mailing list there, you will be automatically entered into a random drawing for my book of the year, which we will get to in just a minute. So I read a lot. I read probably 20 to 40 books a year. Each year I try to narrow down my 10 faves and then share them with you guys in the case that you want to order them. Of course, all of these books will have a link to Amazon for you to be able to purchase them if you would like. And then one lucky winner will get the book of the year, which will be revealed in just a few minutes. So, Aaron, just before we get into mine, man, you read any good books this year?
Yes, I did. I've got 3 recommendations, actually, that were kind of out of the normal. I'm a seminary student, so these are, mandatory reading.
Did you say cemetery?
Hey. So, yes, sir. Let me read. Let me bring these up right now. The first one is called. This is in no particular order. The first one I read that was actually pretty good was called "Holy Sexuality and the Gospel" by Christopher Yuan. He's I believe he got saved at age 20 or 21. Came out of the closet when he was a teenager and got saved, and still struggles with homosexual temptations and things like that. I believe he travels with his mom now around giving talks and talking through his struggle now from a biblical perspective. But this book, Holy Sexuality and the Gospel, is all about how do you actually talk to people, whether in your community or family or friends, about this subject. And I think this is a very important subject, especially with, as the time of this recording, President Biden just signed into law the Respect for Marriage Act. So now, this is just going to get worse and worse. This book was fantastic in helping you to know how to do that. Let's see. There was another book, if you're interested in learning more about the Southern Baptist Convention, a classic on the subject and the conservative resurgence is called The Baptist Reformation by Jerry Sutton. Frankly, it's a history book, but if you don't know anything about what the convention has gone through in the last 40 years and you still think that the convention owns all the Southern Baptist churches and they have say in what your church does, okay, this is the book for you.
Okay, and I want to chime in here. I read this book on my journey, and I'm going to give a second to that motion. You must read this book. And Aaron, here's the deal. I talked to a guy recently, and he was challenging me about my affiliation with the Southern Baptist Convention. And after listening to him talk, I just stopped and said, man, look, respectfully,
you just don't know what you're talking about. And why don't you let me buy you a book or two so that we can be conversant? Because it's crazy, man.
Yeah.
The kind of stuff people think or believe, especially most of the old school IFB guys, when they are anti-SBC, they're going back to something that was going on in the 40s or 50s. And true to their typical nature, they're fighting 70 or 80-year-old battles.
Right.
And we need to at least refresh the screen. So I like that book.
That's a fantastic book. And then the final recommendation was really, if you got a layperson or if you're a pastor out there that just would like to beef up your knowledge about how to interpret scripture or treat different genres, 40 Questions About Interpreting the Bible by Robert Plummer. It was fantastic. Very simple. Each chapter is like 7 or 8 pages, but it deals with things like how do I interpret the book of like Hosea versus something in the New Testament? Do I treat Old Testament scriptures the same way I treat New Testament? If I'm not as confident preaching from the Old Testament, this book was fantastic and helped me understand, this is the difference between historical narrative and poetry and chronicles and things like that. So that was very helpful. 40 Questions About Interpreting the Bible by Robert Plummer.
Got it. That's awesome. It sounds like a fairly easy read.
Yes.
Are there pictures?
Unfortunately, no. But
Okay.
I can confidently recommend this to somebody in your church that's just curious. Like, I just want to learn more about
Me,
Bible
I'm more
study.
on Dr. Seuss level.
Dr.
Yeah.
Places you'll go, right?
Yeah, green eggs and ham. I just bought that for one of my kids for Christmas. So.
That's great.
Okay, man. Well, let's jump into my list here. Again, read several books this year, and there's some unique things on this list this year that a little out of the box. But Chan, let's work through my top 10 books of 2022.
Sure. Coming in no particular order, number 10, The Tech Wise Family by Andy Crouch.
Yeah. So the Tech Wise Family is just about navigating the issues related to technology as a parent. I mean, I've noticed that it's easy to default with a screen, whether it's giving your kids a tablet or you're navigating the issues of are your kids going to have cell phones?
Yeah.
I mean, my 15-year-old has a cell phone, and how do I allow that? How do I manage that? What screen times? How much? All that. I just think if you've never really had a deep dive thinking about technology in your family, it's probably a good book to pick up because we've been intentional with our kids. I mean, we don't. It's just not a free for all. My daughter hates it. She's 15. She thinks it should just be a free for all, but it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, her phone is locked down 24/7, and I manually allow certain things to happen. Like, there's only certain people you can text at certain times, and if I'm going to let you text all your friends, it's going to be a window I open up during a specific window.
So there's a software or tool that you use to do that with?
Yeah, I use the Apple Screen Time feature. I'm all of our stuff's Apple. We joke about Apple products, but I mean I have phone, watch, iPad, all of it. And so it is a very functional feature. I don't know how all the Android products work. I'm sure there's something very similar. With my little kids, they have the Amazon Fire Kid tablets, which are already pre-screened for content. Yeah. And like my 5-year-old, it's set up for 5-year-old. Now, again, it doesn't mean that everything that they say is good for 5-year-olds is okay, but I mean, I'm pretty confident that they have to ask me to download certain things.
Right.
And then I can even set up, you can only do an hour of video time. Now, we don't have to really do it with the little kids because they don't have unlimited access to their iPads. That's what they call them. I give them to them, say, you've got an hour, go. But as far as real content curbing, I do that a lot through the Apple products. And honestly, it's a good thing. I can say you can only talk to certain contacts. Yeah. Like literally set up. You can talk to mom, you can talk to dad, you can talk to brother. And then if I want to change that, I can say you can talk to anybody who I've approved to you to have a contact. My daughter can't manually add contacts to her phone. She has to ask me. And that way, when I say you can talk to all your contacts, I'm confident that I've already approved all the contacts.
That's great.
So, I mean, she doesn't have, FaceTime is off of her phone. Internet is off of her phone. She only can do that if she comes to me and says, I have a homework research project. I'll say, okay, you have to sit here at the table and I can approve Internet Explorer for 30 minutes. Yeah. But you have to be facing me. I mean, like the screen has to be facing me, all that kind of stuff. So my kids never go into their room with internet on their phone. Yeah. Never unlimited talk. Never talking after, it's shut down from 9 o'clock to whatever. So yeah, and I think that you might not be as extreme as me, but I think you should consider being as extreme as me.
Oh yeah.
I mean, do you want your kids hooked on porn?
No.
When they're 7, 8, just because it's easier to parent that way, and it's not easier to parent.
Right.
It's just easier to fail, doing stuff like that. Anyways, I diverge here, but it's a great book.
It's amazing. My daughter's only 3 months old, and already she has become more aware of screens and stuff.
Oh, my.
And like to get her to look at me now, I have to face the phone away because she's like drawn to it.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's amazing just how early they learn. The next book you've got here is Wild Things by Stephen James.
Wild Thing, man. That's a good one. Actually, it's a parenting book. And Wild Things is specifically about boys and the developmental stages of boys and how each stage, they're the wanderer, they're the explorer, they're the this, So each age bracket has some identity. And I found it to be incredibly accurate. I've taken one of my men through this who has 4 boys. I've got 3 boys. Another man in my church has 4 boys with one on the way, and they're not sure if it's a boy or girl. But we worked through this book after I read it, and super helpful. Guys, we just have to be, there are certain things with parenting that is child specific, and I got 3 boys, and I want to let them be boys, and I want to also let them love Jesus and all that. So Wild Things was a helpful parenting book.
Okay, sounds good. Next one you got here is Once We Were Strangers by Sean Smucker.
Okay, so I'm going to open up my weird side here for a minute. So on my sabbatical, which I've talked about on the podcast, I read, when I go on a break, I read out of the box. Like when I go on an actual break, even a vacation, I don't take a stack of books with me about pastoral ministry or personal development. I read for either soul nourishment or mental nourishment. For me, mental nourishment is completely reading out of the genre of Christian, so I read some nonfiction, like novel-based type stuff. This particular book is actually based on a true story. Once We Were Strangers is the story of Sean Smucker, who's a novel writer, and how he became friends with a Middle Eastern refugee in his hometown. And it is incredible. Just gives you insight into what refugees have to deal with, how they think, how they're treated, and how we can make connections with them and actually become friends with them. And so Once We Were Strangers, referring to we would have never known each other had you not been dropped off from the Middle East here in rural Pennsylvania. And cool story, just kind of engaging story there. Sean Smucker's a good writer. He's a Christian. And he wrote he's written multiple novels. In fact, it's not on my top 10 list, but I also read another novel by him, The Weight of Memory, which was an intriguing novel. I read that also. So Sean Smucker just generally is a good writer, but Once We Were Strangers really hit the list because it just opened up my eyes to something I was really not aware of. I mean, honestly, I don't know any refugees. We've worked with the soccer league a little bit, but as far as actual encountering, but it made me want to. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a good book.
That sounds like a good place to get some sermon illustrations.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, definitely.
Winning the War in Your Mind by Craig Groeschel.
Yeah, anything he writes is probably pretty good, mainly because Craig Groeschel is a great communicator. He's kind of known for that. His podcast is good. His sermons are typically good. His leadership talks are good. And I think his method is putting a lot of his content into print, so it communicates well. Winning the War of Your Mind is basic habit forming stuff related to how you think. How you think changes how you live, and we know that. I've read thinking books before, heard sermons on it before, but Craig Groeschel dials it in real good. Angie and I read that one together this year, and honestly, man, half the battles you face are in your mind, changing the way that you think about yourself, about temptation, about the Christian life, and all those sort of things. So yeah, Craig Groeschel nailed it, as he always does. And Winning the War of Your Mind is a book that in fact, just yesterday, I gave this book to a pastor and his wife, who were here to get some help and counsel, so I'm highly recommending that one this year.
Sounds great. Next up, Diary of a Pastor's Soul by M. Craig Barnes.
Yeah, that was. Man, I struggled with whether that was going to be my favorite book of the year. This book it's written as as it's true, because some of these things actually happen, but the pastor changed names and kind of switched it around.
Yeah.
But here's the setting of the book. The book is told as the last year of a pastor's ministry before he retires. So he announces his retirement effective 1 year from the announcement date. Then the book, The Diary of a Pastor's Soul, is one journal entry per week through that year about something related to ministry and experiences that he went through. Things like somebody that he loved died. He had a problem with a member. And it's all these little vignettes that you as a pastor absolutely are going to deal with. And then one of them, my favorite chapter, I don't want to sell it too much, but he talks about this guy who was faithful to church. Then his son got a terminal illness, slowly faded away and died. And then this man, his soul started slowly fading away and dying, ultimately where he slipped away from church and God. And he summarized that particular chapter by saying, sometimes as a pastor, you will be the recipient of other people's fury with God, and you have to be okay with that. That's your ministry to them, absorbing that wrath. And I'm telling you right now, I have seen that 50 times at least in church. And that chapter alone would be worth the price of the admission. But that was a cool book.
That sounds like a great one.
This coming February, join Pastor Bryan Samms, H.B. Charles Jr., Kerry Schmidt, and Kurt Skelly in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida for 3 days of powerful worship, warm fellowship, and practical workshops. You can register now at bryansamms.com, and podcast listeners will enjoy an exclusive discount when you use the code PODCAST at checkout. We look forward to seeing you February 8th through the 10th for Church Advance Conference 2023. Remember to use the code PODCAST to claim your discount and register today at bryansamms.com. That's bryansamms.com.
Next up, you got The Flourishing Pastor by Tom Nelson.
Yeah, I just picked this one. This was kind of a later read. It was a fall read for me. And I just happened to see it scrolling on Scribd, which, let me just pause here and say, I usually find a few reading hacks during the year. Mine this year was becoming a subscriber to Scribd. Scribd is like Netflix for books. And so you subscribe, pay a monthly fee, and then you can access any books in their library. And I found it to be basically without flaw as far as pretty much if I needed a book, it's been on there. Now, obviously, you don't own the book. So any highlights or notes that you make in the book, if you quit subscribing, obviously they're going to go away. But man, I found commentaries on here. I did a deep dive study on small groups because we're getting ready to make a change next year in the church. And I've got 3 major books. I'm looking at it kind of right now while we're talking. 3 major books on that. The Flourishing Pastor is just kind of what it sounds like when you hear it. It's about the soul of the pastor being what it needs to be in order for him to do well in ministry. And I'm trying to flip through here because there's a couple of, here's just a quote. Are we masking our own spiritual impoverishment under a thin veneer of nice and pleasant sounding professionalism? Are we deceiving ourselves as well as others that our inner worlds as well as our lives are really together? Are we simply faking it? Just that, that kind of stuff, kind of hits home and makes you diagnose. And so it's a soul book, man, that one, right? Let me read one more quote. Biblically, the wilderness is a place of dependent, disciplined, purifying solitude where God must be trusted. Deserts bring people quickly to the end of their self-sufficiency and independence. So, it's all of that. And I think, he just rolls on with really good stuff, diagnosing your soul and how ministry can bring the best or worst out of you.
That's good. All right. We're getting down to, close to the upper tiers here. Turnaround by Jason Allen.
Yeah, I just was talking to a guy the other day who last year at Church Advance Conference, we gave away a book called Leading Major Change in Your Church by Jeff Yorch, who is the president of Gateway Seminary in California. Jason Allen's president of Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and probably one of the greatest seminary turnarounds. Now, Yorch's book is about relocating an entire seminary. Alan's book is about the turnaround of the seminary itself. I mean, Midwestern is now, I think, in the top 3 in the world. Seminaries, as far as student population. There's Liberty. There's of course Southern.
Yeah, that's a big
But
one.
I mean, Midwestern's up there, and it wasn't up there. It was one of the worst seminaries in the SBC, and it's a fantastic place now. I mean, I've used some of their Bible studies. I've considered whether I would actually get a PhD from there. He's just doing a really, really, really good job. So Turnaround is the 10 principles about how he shifted the culture at Midwestern Seminary, and a really good book. I really like Jason Allen. He's a good communicator, good teacher, and we did a men's study here one time where it was a video curriculum, and he led, and he's just really good. So I'd highly recommend his stuff too.
Yeah,
So,
he's good.
Yeah.
All right, top 3. Here we go. Number 3, Faithful Endurance by Colin Hansen.
Oh, yeah. So Faithful Endurance is about pastoral endurance. Man, I don't know if there's any drum that needs to be beat more than that. Here's the bottom line, man. If you're going to make it, you're going to just have to, there's going to be some times where you are going to have to grind it out. That's what the book of 2 Timothy is all about, man. 2 Timothy is about continue in the worst of circumstances, in the most challenging personal things, hostility in our culture. You just mentioned these marriage acts. Guys, it's not going to be easier to be a pastor in America or anywhere for that matter. And I think sometimes we've glamorized ministry, and that's why we have such a fallout. Faithful endurance is about, you know what, you're going to have to grind it out, and you're going to have to, your soul's going to have to be cared for so that you can face challenges, enormous challenges, and still put one foot right in front of the other and keep going. At the end of the day, sometimes it's just about making it to the next day and being okay with that. And if you're thinking that it's always going to be easy, there's always going to be accolades, and it's always going to be fun, and it's all about the pulpit, you're gonna flounder, man. So you got to get some grit in you. And I think pastoral endurance or pastoral grit is maybe one of the most needed subjects in this day, and that book will help you in that end.
That's great. Well, they just reminded me when we were going through the church planters assessment, the first module the first interview, I guess, they had us do was the calling, which I think you're probably familiar with when you attended with our Spanish pastor. But they said, one of the distinct things that they said to us was, it's going to be hard, and you better get your calling secure, because some days that will be the only thing that's keeping you where you are.
Absolutely.
And that's the only thing you have to hold on to. So that's a tremendous, valuable subject. Number 2 is Sugar Birds by Cheryl Bostrom.
Okay, so Sugar Birds is going back to the novels. This is something I read on my sabbatical. Sugar Birds, the only reason I didn't make it number 1 is because I the other book that I'm going to mention in just a minute really rocked my world. This one was just super entertaining, super good. It was a page turner. So Sugar Birds refers to it's a what's it called? A metaphor. A sugar bird is a bird that's always looking for a particular seed that satisfies.
Okay.
So the analogy to to humans is sometimes we're always looking for something that's perfect, something that's best or better. So here's the setting. Okay. The book starts with a young girl who accidentally set her house on fire. She's young and she's frightened, and she then goes and hides in the woods. Like literally lives in the woods. She was a tree climber. She's like living in trees, and there's all kinds of crazy things that happens to her, but she survives for weeks on her own out in the woods. Okay. Then enter person number 2. This is a young lady whose dad has just taken a job and has sent her to grandma's house for a lengthy period of time, and she is ticked. And it just so happens that these two worlds are going to ultimately collide. So one chapter is about this girl, the next chapter is about, and there's this build toward them meeting. And man, I don't know. It's hard to describe what it is, but both have unique, desperate problems in their heart. She's dealing with this. She's dealing with the imperfect family, and they're going to come together and ultimately learn the lessons that they need to learn in life. And man, it's high octane, page turner, highly recommend it. And I'm not normally like this, but I've just found myself enjoying books like this a lot more as the older I'm getting, especially when I need, sit by a beach or something, just read. So, and then we got Numero uno,
Number
Chan.
one.
Number one. This is the book. This is the one that if you guys sign up at bryansamms.com to enter our mailing list to stay in touch with us, you're going to automatically be drawn on the 1st of January, I think is what we're going to do, and you will have this book sent to you on my dime because you will want to read this book, and it is called
Raising Grateful Kids in an Entitled World by Kristen Welch.
Oh boy. Just fast. Look, if you don't want your life changed, please ignore this book. It was a earth-shattering kind of book, like changed us. And obviously it's parenting, but it's more than parenting. It's about your view of stuff. It's about materialism. It's about entitlement. It's about working hard. It's about sharing. It's about ministry. So in so many words, Kristen Welch began some mission type work over in Africa. On one of her early trips to Africa, she met a teenage boy who his parents died, and he was basically raising his younger siblings. So this is out third world, you know. And the guy had the joy of the Lord, this kid. And she basically sits down and says, man, I can't remember the kid's name, but man, you have this joy unspeakable, and you have not, your life is so tough, how? And the kid looked at her and said, I have Jesus and he is enough. And then she said that she was just shattered. And her response was, not verbally, but in her mind was, I also have Jesus, but he isn't enough.
Yeah.
And, typical suburbia family, like mine, $5 Starbucks drinks. You need this, sure. You need this, order this. Oh, you want a skateboard? Cool, let's order on Amazon. Just this mindset, raising brats, okay? And the journey that it took them on of serving, of working, of not just giving them things, but changed our life. I mean, one big takeaway is we went to a commission format in our family. So my kids have jobs at home. Adriana's are predominantly childcare. Brent's predominantly at this point is trash and weeding the flower beds. And they have every Saturday I deposit money into their accounts. They have accounts. And our deal with them is, as parents, we give you everything that you need: food, clothing, and shelter. You will then pay for anything that you want. So you want a Starbucks drink? Awesome. Go buy it.
Yeah.
So I'll go to Starbucks and I will buy a drink for me and Angie. And if Adriana wants one, she will buy one. Now, every once in a while, I will still do something for them. But Adriana, you got all the clothes you need, but you want a new pair of jeans? Okay, do you need the pair of jeans? Do you have jeans that fit and work? Yes, sir. Okay, go buy. You can go buy whatever you want. Brent wanted a pair, believe it or not, Brent got in his mind, he wanted a pair of Oakley sunglasses. Well, I mean, hello. I have 3 pair of Oakley sunglasses. But guess what? I bought them, and I earned the money to buy them. And so there's that. So Brent, you want sunglasses? Great. Save your money up for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it was. And he went and bought a pair of Patrick Mahomes edition Oakley sunglasses. Okay. He bought his own basketball goal for our house. And it's not just money. Money is a big piece of it because kids need to learn value and work, and they need to associate these realities. But it's also about serving and giving and sacrificing, and so that we don't create kids that don't understand. I mean, I've sat down with my daughter and ran the gauntlet of what is it going to look like for you to graduate college and live on your own. We came to the conclusion that if she's single, which, I mean, who knows, but if she was single, she would need somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000 to, to kind of live. And I said, now that's if you want to maintain somewhat of a similar lifestyle that you have grown up with. Do you know how much an apartment is going to cost? Do you know how much utilities are going to cost? Do you know how much your cell phone costs? Do you know how much car insurance costs? I mean, I'm just running down this with her. Yeah. Well, the average teenager gets the keys to a Jeep, and they become worthless, just like all those Hollywood kids or hedge fund kids or what do they call them? What's the other kids?
They're born with a silver spoon in their mouth.
Yeah, there you go. The trust fund. That's what trust fund
yeah,
babies. That's the word I was looking for. They're worthless for the most part. And I'm not ashamed to say it. Worthless. You think that you need $1,000 deposited into your account every month from a parent. Well, you're a loser, and you're going to continue to be a loser. And I don't want my kids to be losers. So some people think we're harsh and whatever, but that's fine. That's fine. I'm not going to let my kids grow up. And yes, I have money, and I have a comfortable lifestyle. But that doesn't mean that my kids are going to be spoiled. I mean, it goes down to things like Christmas presents. We're not buying them $10,000 worth of Christmas presents. Something you want, something you need, something something you want, something you need, something to wear, something to read. That's it. And then if my parents want to do more, fine. But it just goes hand in glove with pretty much all of life. Yeah. I want somebody to read that book, and so I'm going to give it to somebody who gets drawn randomly from our mailing list. But man, here's to 2023, Chan, of more reading.
Amen.
Reading well, reading lots, and growing and seeing our lives change. So I hope that blesses you, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Bryan Samms Podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode, and please take a moment to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, at the beginning of next year, the name of this podcast is officially changing to Church Advance with Bryan Samms. If you're already following or subscribed to the podcast, there's nothing you have to do because everything is going to be pushed to this same podcast feed. You're just going to notice the name and podcast artwork are going to display the new name as of the 1st of January. Hey, if you enjoy this content, then please don't hesitate to leave us a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends. You can also connect with us online at bryansamms.com. The Bryan Samms Podcast is hosted by Bryan Samms and produced by myself, Luke Clayton, and my team at mustincrease.com. Be sure to see the show notes or video description for more information about resources and content featured in this episode. Thanks again for checking us out, and we look forward to having you join us again next time right here on the Bryan Samms Podcast.
Hey, everybody.
The end. See you next time.